Hey, it's Chris. What are we doing today? Essen! We're talking about the hotness from Essen and why I'm going to convince you the 10 Essen games that you need to know about, maybe 15, depending on how loquacious I'm feeling, how wordy I am today. My mother was an English teacher, in case you didn't know. But why you should get them, and also let's play why you shouldn't get them, you know? Devil on one shoulder, angel on the other. Because the other thing that I've seen recently is, well, no spoilers. Let's go. So that thing I was going to say right there, the thing I've seen is, you know, again, this is what gets the clicks, right? 10 games that you need to buy. No. I mean, I can't do it. I can't say that you need a lot of games. You know, I've got a video upcoming that's going to be like 7 games I think everybody should at least buy. Actually, I'm going to put in the parentheses, at least play as a gamer in general. But, you know, I hate the fact that people are like, you need to go buy this game at this convention. This is going to be a game you have to get. No. Like slowly doing one of these things, right? No, there's no game that you have to buy. None whatsoever. Not even this one. We'll talk about it in a minute. But there are great games, but inevitably a vast majority of them, as someone posted over on Reddit, their analysis of like their last 2 years of buying stuff at Essen, like the vast majority of it, like 80% of it wasn't even in their collection. And the stuff that was still a mixed bag of, am I going to keep it or not? So that's why I talk about it this way. Because I feel like I'm taking crazy pills here at the same time. Like the only one that's like, hey, maybe you shouldn't buy a few things. These are cool. And they're cool if they're right for you. But if you're like me and you're piling things up and your wife kicks it all out of the kitchen because you have a family party going on tomorrow, well, then you have to have somewhere to put it. And if you don't have anywhere to put it and you don't have anyone to play with it, why are you buying it in the first place? I'm your reality check. With that being said, though, buy it if it's still right for you, but maybe also wait 6 months or trade for it as always. Without further ado, let's do the list. Preamble over. Screw it. We'll start with this. Cascadia landmarks. What do you need to know? AEG sent me a copy before Essen. I'm going to have a review out, maybe even before this video, maybe not. So what do you got going on with this one? Well, it's a little bit of a mixed bag overall. I mean that more of a metaphorical, but also a literal sense. Because essentially what this is, and it really is sort of 2 small expansions combined into one. And I know why they did it this way. At the same time, I'm one of those people that isn't always a huge fan of incorporating a 5th to 6th player expansion into things. And that's kind of the main crux of things. When you open it up, you've got a whole bunch of tiles that basically allow you to play with 5 and 6. And that's the main purpose of the vast majority of the contents in this. The landmarks expansion content, adding essentially 2 new separate objectives that when you're playing an animal tile down onto one of the areas, if you make an area of the environment of 5 or more, you can, instead of placing the animal tile down in the tile you just placed, or, you know, you can potentially play it otherwhere, but if you play it on, if you have the ability to play one of them, you can instead forego that and play it in the tile you just played that created that area, and you get basically another victory point scoring condition. And you have 5 of those, 1 for each area, and you grab them and take them, and only you then can get them for that. It also gives you just a little bit more animal scoring in general, and that's probably the 2 big things, and those things are excellent. They are excellent portions of things, but you're going to pay for the 5 to 6 player expansion and a little bit of the mission scenario thing where they just kind of say, hey, score this many points via doing this thing, and they give you a ton of those just like they did in the first one. And if you do that, great, and it's awesome. You can do that solo, and it works tremendously. If you're not a solo player, you don't even know that it's in the base game originally, like me, right? It's an awesome game, though. But have you played the base game enough? People don't like this game as well. As a Spiel winner, people still did not like this game, and that's okay. But I'll tell you right now, it takes a good thing. It makes it better. And to be honest with you, I'm not sure I'd play without it. The landmarks. I'm not sure I would anymore at this point. I don't think it adds that much. My wife was not as big a fan, but I didn't think it added too much whatsoever. It's going to definitely appeal to the people that thought this was too light to begin with. But that's why we're starting with it at number 1. Look, number 2, we're going to talk about Space Bees in Space, because Stonemeyer's new game, well, you know, Untold Generations, humble honeybees have basically taken over space and planets. And so we're going to kind of see what they've got going on from a worker placement, tile placement, variable power setup. I don't know. Expeditions, to be frank, again, as someone who somehow, don't ask me how, I don't actually know how it happened, ended up with 2 copies in their collection, the regular and the ironclad. It's a whole nother video. But we're getting a new game very, very shortly after here from Stonemeyer. This is like back-to-back releases I have not seen in that much quick succession from them in a long time. And you're getting one of 20 unique factions. I didn't know there were that many types of bees in the world in the first place. But you start the game with a hive, resources, workers. Your hive building challenge awaits. Exploring planets, gathering resources, developing technologies, and creating carvings based off of your faction's own strengths. I have no idea about this, but you know, with all of this Stonemaier stuff, it's sort of like Garfield, right? I am happy to be on the outside looking in. I'm happy to see what it looks like and what it entails. And just like with Expeditions, end up with a copy to try it out firsthand at some point. However, I mean, Stonemaier games are definitely not for everyone. And there's a reason up until like literally the past month, I have not had one stay in my collection whatsoever at all at this point. And I'm not sure the two different ones will actually stay in my collection either. But they always offer me some interesting thoughts on what I think I'm going to like, what I'm going to like, and how I'm going to like it. But from this side of things, there is absolutely no reason to get a Stonemaier game early. You know, there is not a whole lot of information apart from the usual huge channels that will have copies that will be slowly leaking information out once the moratorium or the ban comes out on this. Because inevitably, around the time of Essen, it probably will, if that's when they're going to be selling copies, or whenever Champions are going to get them too, because there's usually about 4 or 5 big name channel reviews that put it out right when that moratorium ends, when that embargo essentially ends, because that's always what happens with them, is they have a hard date and they say nothing before this. So, you know, with all the Stonemaier ones, with how divisive I feel like they are, not actually, people talk a good game, but even the dynamics of the gameplay when it comes to a worker placement in general, what is it doing different? Can you take 20 different factions and do a dwellings and make it that good? Because that's a head-to-head comparison I'm going to make right now if you're going to say you have that many factions, especially when you have something else like Voidfall or Dwellings or the upcoming other one from Dwellings that I can't even remember that I'm backing, Andromeda's Edge. There you go. That's how this video is going. But that's why you wait on it as well, because inevitably there are a lot of people that pre-order this, especially through Champions, and it ends up in the secondary market. Be like me, trade for it. Next up, speaking of that, Devere is dipping back into the heavy worker placement, and you know, spiritual successor, I'll say, completely making this up, to Bitoku with the White Castle. No, not that White Castle, although it would be kind of cool to have a burger themed, not food chain magnet getting deluxified over on GameFound sort of situation. But, you know, IPs and legal lawsuits aside, we're getting sort of, you know, Daimyo dynasty set in Japan, where you're controlling clans trying to, well, influence the court via worker placements with dice. And I'm intrigued, you know. I've got 2 Deveres sitting behind me, Bitoku hiding there. I've got Jerusalem sitting there. And, you know, they both really hit the mark on terms of solid, different worker placement things, as we were just talking about with Apiary. And the question just is, does this theme appeal to you? I know a lot of people don't care about this. Resource management, worker placement, dice placement. You're building this castle and utilizing it in several different zones. You know, I want this game to be good. You know me, recently I've been dabbling in the dice worker placement, but with something like this, how dice worker placement is it going to be? Is it going to be like Bitoku? Is it going to be like Jerusalem? Is it going to be one of the Garfils with, you know, Wayfarers? Is it going to be more like the other one, Monasterium, which is on crowdfunding, which just got ported over to North America, or is trying to? You know, what twist is the die going to give it? Because it needs to give it. With Monasterium, it gives it. With Toku, it gives it. You know, with Wayfarers, it gives it. But what's going to be the twist here? And if you're a fan of this like me, you know, I need to know if that twist is going to work for me. Devere has a great track record. But again, how different? How many can you have? And this is maybe the other thing. If you're a heavy worker placement game type person, this one isn't being rated right now as heavy. It's got under a 3 rating on Board Game Geek with an 80-minute playtime, which if 80 minutes is exact, I'm going to guess you can get it closer to 60. And a lot of people who are going for these heavier ones, they want something heavier. They want the Bitoku 2 hour. They want the Jerusalem 2-3 hours, multiple player counts, because that's going to be the other question is, you know, like with Jerusalem, 3 to 5 players. Is this going to be as good at 1 to 4? Food for thought. And in case it wasn't clear, this is Essen, folks. We're not getting a lot of Amerithresh. Now, we're getting some, but these are mostly on the heavier Euro side of things. The next 3 games I'm going to talk to you about, 3.5 rating, 3.45 rating, and unknown rating, but the game it's re-implementing has a 3.53 rating. And that's the problem, right? Like, superficially, how do you tell the biggest difference? We're talking the 3 heavy Euros, the 3 that are going to give you those weights that I just mentioned, right? You have Evacuation, where you've got a reverse sort of economy where you start out at the high end of the min-max gauntlet and you're slowly whittling your way down as this planet is slowly dying, exploding, and you're trying to evacuate all of the resources from the old one to the new one. And this is going to have sort of a very different board. It's from the designer Suchi. You may remember him from Underwater City, so the pedigree is already there. Hand management, income, pick 'em, deliver, though. Not a worker placement, which is more appealing to me in the first place, just like the next one we'll talk about in a second. And this economy going in reverse is going to be very interesting because, again, this is completely hit or miss. This is something I have not really seen elsewhere from a mechanical standpoint. And so will this mechanic work? Honestly, will it appeal to you? This is an I think versus an I know, and you don't know because you haven't played anything like it, and that's terrifying. And I can see it going either way, but it plays in anywhere from an hour to almost 3. That's the other issue that concerns me the most, because at least these next two are going to be a little bit shorter. Next up is Kutna Hora from Czech Games, and the City of Silver, as you're smithing silver, building the city, and trying to construct a cathedral all at the same time, with a more dynamic market economy that's going to be the main crux of this game in the first place, as you're using your asymmetric guild faction in order to manipulate things to your best. And do you like economic games? I love the idea of economic games. I'm horrible at the actual practice of them. And that's what scares me the most as you're building this infrastructure and the tile placement mechanism as a whole in order to gain the most profit and build the most in the city to get personal victory. Czech Games, solid game? Sure. But again, doing things in a different way is high risk, high reward. 8.4 on Board Game Geek at the time of me filming this, which is fantastic, but it's also a very small sample size. And when we speak of sample size, I mean, we also talk of the next game, which is Zhanguo. This is The First Empire, and this is a remake of the 2014 game, again, which is ranked in the top like 800 of Board Game Geek. That sounds horrible. At the same time, you think of all the thousands of games that are on there, 720 actually is pretty good. 384 for strategy right now. So, you know, as a fending off of the civil unrest with a worker placement style in the original game, I don't know. It's going to be streamlined. You're playing over 5 rounds where you're trying to gain the most favor of the Emperor by squashing things, building things, and managing things the best. I don't know. There's a few comments over in the comment section of Board Game Geek that talk about the new streamlined rulebook and a few of the variability that's going to be involved in the tile changings and those aspects, but still details are very, very sparse from Sorry We Are French. And so that's going to be the other question that you have to ask yourself is, you know, am I willing to risk it on a remake? Because remakes, just like I'm looking smack dab at the one in front of me right now of Hamburg, the remake of Bruges, I'm like, oh yeah, that's a, you know, smashing hit for me. I think that's going to work so well up here. And then you get the remake, right? And it's either too close to the original that you don't see the point of why they did it in the first place, or it's so far away that it gets away from what you liked about the original as well in the first place. And so how do you feel about that? How do you feel about that? And what's this going to do? And you have people that still love the first one. I mean, look at games like A Study in Emerald. Simon's putting out A Study in Emerald 3 now. But you still have people debating in the comment section, I like the first edition better. I like the second edition better, right? You've got things that are going to come like this. You got the one sitting behind it with Nemesis Lockdown. People doing the same thing nowadays. You got the Ankh, Blood Rage, Rising Sun debate. I mean, you know, similar, but also, do you need all 3? Do you play all 3? Do you just prefer one over all 3? And when you remake a game, that's inevitably going to happen even more so than just putting out a sequel slight difference variance. So that's what we're going to be talking about there as well. And then we're going over here something a little bit different, and we're going with Planta Nubo, worker placement, tile placement, an upcoming one from a Rosenberg. So tile placement in Rosenberg, right? Never heard that before, but that's going to be the question with another nature-themed game where you're trying to harvest oxygen in sort of a solar punk world it goes. I have no idea. I'm intrigued though. The setting, the mechanics, but how descript do you feel like it needs to be? There's not really a rulebook yet released at the time of me filming this. It's available for pre-order through the game builders. So it's kind of a mixed bag in terms of how much you know versus how much you're willing to wager. The pre-order's up though. You can pre-order it without any details. Next up, Mandu Games is giving us a head-to-head Jekyl and Hyde versus Scotland Yard, sort of a 1 versus 1 dynamic 2-player 20-minute style game. And you know me, I love these head-to-head ones where you've got Dr. Jekyll spinning off into Hyde that may also end up hurting you because he can't hide himself, haha, as well, while you've got Scotland Yard hot on your heels. And the interesting thing about this one is, and you know, mechanically speaking, again, I like the idea of it. In practicality, it didn't work the last time I played the cooperative version of it that well, even though it was a solid game. We're talking trick taking and a 2-player head-to-head trick taking game, right? Whew, dynamics are going to have to be tough with this one. Mandu has another one out that's a very similar, different theme as well, with a 2-player trick taking head-to-head game. I think it's Dracula, and that one doesn't have as good a ratings, but this one appears to be a little bit better overall, based on the comments, based on the, I don't know, just the aesthetic, just my gut feeling. I don't have anything solid, but this one just appeals to me much more than the other one. And so that's what you're going to have to try and figure out. 2-player, asymmetric trick taking. And then it's going over to Korea board games, but you're building pyramids in ancient Egypt, and tile placement, layering, map building. Essentially, each round you're only playing 1 tile, and after you play these tiles, they're going to trigger all of the other tiles that are in order. These tiles have workers, resources, money that can be activated or even reactivated. And you've got to go in a straight line or diagonal line depending on how you're building these pyramids. If you have enough resources, well, you can build another level, which gets you more. And so when all the stacks have been used up, you go, and the pyramid worth on the most points is going to win. 2 expansions are coming in the box as well. Family style, strategic style, kind of complemented on one side or the other. But this is one that's going to fly under the radar for a lot of people. But I really have had my eye on this one probably, you know, over the last 6 months to a year, even since it was announced. So I want to see what Korea can give us in terms of board games. Now, the last one, we're going to complete out the top 10 here, is Dorfromantik Das Duell. And so we're going to see the German. Now, is this going to be language independent? Is it going to have an English version released to Essen? That's really the question. Of the original, which is sort of just like a Zen building game, if you're familiar with the console game in the first place. But this one is going to be a 2-player version of it, 30 to 45 minutes, which is much more appealing as a tile laying game with a modular board. So 2 teams or 2 players, depending on how you want to do it. Although, you know, I don't think it's really going to work well with 2 teams. You know, let's just say 2 players. You can do 2 copies if you want to play with 4 people, it says. But you're basically creating these hexagonal landscapes, and you're going to have expansion of the landscape and the territories with new types of assignments, as well as just a little bit of everything that made the original one likable as well. 2 independent modules that can provide more challenge, more variety, and more interaction. I didn't really think the first one was that appealing, but you now give me a 2-player one with a little bit more asymmetry and modularity. Okay, you've got it on my radar, on my wish list now. But 2 players though? 2-player, dedicated? You may not like this. It still may be too zen for you in the first place. So take that for what you will. Now, things I didn't talk about, things that are on my radar that, you know, didn't really make the list. Concordia is getting a new map expansion. Have you played Concordia, the base game, enough with the newer edition, Venus? It comes with like 2 maps additionally in it. So no, haven't done that. It's on my radar though. I love the idea of Concordia. Will I ever going to get played enough to justify it? Probably not. Crow D Games or Crowd Games is also going to be having a spin on Portals. No, not Portal, the company, but a collecting magic keys using them to open portals to other worlds with pattern building and set collection. So a little bit of a lighter style game than a lot of these other ones that we're talking about, but also much more accessible. So that one's on my radar as well in that case. And then the other one that we didn't mention, but I've also been looking at in addition, there's a new Imperium Horizons. I just can't justify it. I've got Imperium Legends. I just can't get played. Not going to spend 3 hours to learn, you know, a 45-minute game. Just kidding. Just sort of kidding. I mean, that's a big frustration from the past, though. I mean, learning to play that game should be a lot easier, because I think it'd be appealing to a lot more people, but it's just not well put together from a rulebook standpoint, and that's very frustrating for me. So then we're also going into a few other things. The Gen Con Hotness of World Wonder is getting a more wide release. Welcome 2 is getting a collector's edition. Who knows what that's fully going to entail. Nucleum is the hot one from, I think, Board and Dice in terms of the more heavy Euro side of things. And those are the big ones right now. And there's always a few others that are going to pop up. I mean, there's plenty of ones that like are on crowdfunding that are getting more like wide attention. Things like Unconscious Mind. There's a new Mind Bug expansion going to be premiering over there as well, I think. Galactic Cruise, the heavier worker placement game that's going to be launching in 2024, is going to have some presence. So you're still going to see a lot of that, but maybe lesser to the availability side of things as well. So that's why I stuck with the other ones on this list as well, just being more available-ish. Still making you FOMO, but ish available. That's all I got. Games on my radar. The Essen. Most Essen thing you can Essen talk about. That's all I got. Stay classy. a great day. See you around.